Hello, my name is Miss Amber, and I'm here with your English 12A live lesson. Now, this lesson is going to be a little long. It is on Hamlet, Acts 1, 2, and 3. And in this lesson, we get a lot of information about Shakespeare and the development of theater as the background before we read an excerpt from that play. So let me go ahead and get started sharing my screen. So we're starting at slide 5. And this slide just gives you a breakdown of information about William Shakespeare. So I'm going to give you not necessarily the cliff notes, but just point out some of the important things that you might want to keep in your notes. Now, he was born in 1564. This is in the first line. He was exposed to plays when he was young. And pretty much his father previewed and censored or edited plays that were performed by traveling acting troupes. So that's how he got exposed to them. He did not have a traditional university education like some of the other people of this time who wrote. And that goes to show you, you don't have to have a formal education to be successful at writing. You can pick things up along the way while you're watching things and learning things, and you can put those to good use. He wrote a lot of sonnets. Those are the poems that we just went over in one of the previous lessons. And he wrote a lot of those during a time where the plague shut down theater performances. So those are the things that he's like most known for, plays and sonnets. And what's important about this is not only did he write Hamlet, but he wrote a lot of other plays that people study in schools and that are considered very important to the development of writing. And you'll get to know a little more information about the Globe, which is a theater that he helped create in the following slides. Now, slide 7. Okay, so this just basically goes over the information I already said, him acting and writing plays and it being stopped due to the plague. So skipping over to slide 7, we get a video. This is about comedies and tragedies. Those are the two different types of plays that he wrote. They give you a little background information because comedies and tragedies are something that the Greeks came up with. And his plays just follow those formats. So they give you a little breakdown. Of what goes into a Shakespearean comedy or a Shakespearean tragedy. And they give you a list of certain things to look for. You're going to want to write that down and put those in your notes. Okay, so slide 10 is where they start talking about the Globe Theater. So playhouses were a new thing at the time. At first, when people performed plays, they were just performed outside. And theaters were originally called playhouses, and they were built specifically for plays. So they're very different from modern theaters, and that's what this first slide kind of gives you information about. They tell you, for example, Elizabethan playhouses didn't have hundreds of lights above the stage to spotlight the actors or microphones to amplify their voices. Without lighting or electricity, theater going required much more imagination than now. They didn't have the same props, they didn't have the same technology. So this was a lot different. Remember that this is basically the origin of the modern play that we have grown used to. So this is actually a bit different than what we are used to. And there's less technology backing it. So no microphones, no electricity, no lighting. There weren't very many sound effects to help with drama besides the ones that the actors could make themselves. And they didn't have the sort of props and sets that we're used to seeing today. So they give you some more information about plays here. They tell you that the plays lasted 2 or 3 hours. Um, all of the actors were men because women were not allowed to act. It was literally considered a sin. And all the men dressed up to play female roles as well in the dresses and headpieces. They were usually men whose voices hadn't changed. They hadn't gone through puberty, so they had high voices. People would put out ads to try to recruit people to act that had those voices to play female roles. Some people did consider cross-dressing a sin at this point, because men doing what men are supposed to do and women doing what women are supposed to do was a strong belief back then. But plays kind of developed to be apart from certain aspects of the church as time moved on anyway. So some people looked down on women who even went to watch plays. And that was just a thing that happened over time. There were women who went to go see plays even though society looked down on them. Let's see. They tell you in this last paragraph that Shakespeare's plays were criticized very heavily during his time. And some of those critics apologized after seeing how popular they were. So here we get the Globe Theater proper. So we were just talking about playhouses, but playhouses are not quite the same as theaters. They were basically just stages that you could pick up and move, build and rebuild, break down and rebuild, so that basically people had a stage to be above the crowd since they were outside. In 1599 is when they built the first official Globe Theater. So it wasn't just a playhouse, it was actually a real theater. Pretty much the original version of it was just called the theater, and it was on property that didn't belong to anyone that built it there. So the owner ended up telling them they had to move it. So the actors had to dismantle the theater and move it piece by piece in a cart to rebuild it somewhere else. Shakespeare was part owner and shareholder of that theater. So he made plans for what he wanted the new one to look like, because he wanted there to be a permanent fixture where people could go to perform plays instead of moving around from place to place. So the reason why it's called the Globe is because it had a round shape. It was a round building. This picture over here is actually a picture of the reconstruction of the Globe Theater, which we'll learn a little bit more about in the next couple slides. But as you can see, there's sort of a circular motion here on the banister. So it's like this stage here, and everyone is circled around that portion of the stage, and the balconies are also circular. So this had a very round shape, and that's why it was called the Globe. And because it was a circle shape, it carried the actors' voices better. Basically, in terms of acoustics, that's like the study of how sound moves. The round shape caused the sounds to bounce back from the further edges back into the center. It was just generally better for voices to be carried in there. They also had a trap door that was perfect for ghost surprises and disappearances that would happen during the play. Above the stage was a roof from which props and actors could hover or swoop down into the theater. So this is like the first proper theater that resembles what we would have today. So let me give you more information here about the open air theater. So the top level had private rooms that were directly above the stage, and those were the most expensive seats. Now, the bad thing is, if you were directly above the stage, you only got to see the actors' heads when you're looking like straight down, right? So it's ridiculous that those were the most expensive seats, but people who sat there wanted to be seen by the crowd a little more than they wanted to see the play. So they paid the most expensive prices. And then, like in the picture that we saw over here, you can see that there's these two balconies, right? Now, We call them balconies, but they were called galleries because you were looking at things while you were there. They give you the cost of these. So the top two cost 3 pennies per seat, which was a lot at the time. And the seats in the back of the first floor cost 2. And in the very front, people could watch for only 1. Now, this is standing room only, like when you were at the front of the stage. So like a normal concert. But the prices for the seats were, they came up with those based on whether or not you could be seen by other people easily in the crowd. So up higher, you had to pay more. If you were closer down on the first floor, people would probably be looking at the stage instead of you. So those were the cheapest, even though those are the best seats for viewing the play if you're on the first floor and up close to the stage. It was standing room only, but you still got a clear view of the actual play while it was happening. So there was a word for people who got these first floor seats, or first floor, I guess, standing room space that was close to the stage, and they were called groundlings. And then they point out that today, front seats at a play are usually the most expensive. Now we get into some sad news. In 1613, the Globe burnt down. Pretty much, it just burnt down, and they had to rebuild it. So they rebuilt it in 1614, and it was up at that point for another 30 years. In 1644, though, it was destroyed by the Puritans. So the Puritans were a religious group, and they thought that theaters were evil places. They didn't approve of that due to their religion. So once it was burnt down, that was pretty much it. And plans to rebuild it a second time didn't happen for 300 more years until, like, I think the 80s and 90s. Yes. So here on slide 14, we get the information about the New Globe Theater. So there is a version of the theater that's standing today, and they give you some background on who built it. It was an American actor, Sam Wanamaker. You see that in the first sentence here, Sam Wanamaker. He wanted to see the Globe Theater in London, and he went to London to see it and didn't realize that it was burnt down and not rebuilt. So when he went there in 1949, he was disappointed to see that all was left was, a marker where the theater was. And he founded a trust, which is basically an organization with a specific purpose to raise money for a cause. So he founded a trust to raise money for a project in 1970. So this is like 20 years later. And the construction started in 1987. So he spent a lot of time, literally over 10 years, raising money to rebuild it so that he could try to make a version of it that was as close to the original plans as possible. Unfortunately, he died in 1993, which was before the New Globe Theater was open. It opened in 1997. But it was a success, and it was built to the exact specifications that researchers could get from the writing and descriptions of people who had visited the original Globe. So basically, they were able to look at historical records and plans, and that includes some of Shakespeare's plans as well, some of his written plans for what he wanted the Globe Theater to look and feel like. And they used that as a blueprint for the version that they built. Now, they built it as close as possible, and there are some of the old features preserved, like the mixture of goat hair and plaster that was used as a binding agent. So they used some other things to help hold it together, but they also included the older stuff as well. The biggest difference they'll tell you at the bottom, this bottom paragraph, is the roofing. So the original Globe had a straw thatch roof, but those were outlawed. Literally, Britain made them illegal. It's illegal to make buildings that have straw roofs because of the Great Fire of 1666. A lot of London was destroyed during that fire. So the lawmakers were like, yeah, if our roofs weren't made out of straw, maybe everything wouldn't have caught fire as quick. So we're not allowed to do that anymore. So the roof is a little different. And it's still thatched, which means that it's a pattern of like roofing that crisscrosses, like old style roofs. But it's made out of fire resistant material to respect the law. Okay. So now we're getting into actually reading Hamlet. All of that was just background of the situation in which Hamlet was written and by who and how he contributed to history a little bit. So this goes into the reading selection. So you're going to read the first 3 acts of Hamlet. And they explain to you here that reading a play is different from reading a novel, because authors of a novel can give you detailed information on exactly what they want you to know. They can describe parts of the setting, small details that you're supposed to notice. And there's a lot of techniques that they can choose to make things seem more noticeable or important, stuff like that. But plays are meant to be performed. So the scripts leave a lot to people's imagination. The long story short is, in a play, normally what you get is you'll get a description of the setting, usually. You'll get a description of a person sometimes at the very beginning when they get introduced, and what they're doing when they say certain lines. But other than that and the actual words that the person is supposed to say, you don't really get that much more information. So you have to use a lot of imagination to figure out what what way people are doing things, what they could possibly mean when they say stuff. Because seeing the actors on stage and like their facial expressions and stuff is what puts a lot of the story together for them. And they say when you read Hamlet, pay close attention to the characters' words. There are very few stage directions that describe how characters say their lines. So you'll have to infer what their moods and actions are. Now, they're giving you a modern translation of Shakespeare here. So you don't have to worry about being able to understand the lines. It's mostly in modern English. Some of the sentence order is old timey. So they'll describe certain things first and add details after, but the language itself is in pretty modern English so you can understand it. So you have to think about why characters would say certain things that they say. If someone throws out an insult, the play is not going to tell you, oh, this was said in an insulting manner. But if you read a line that comes off like an insult, or that says something negative, you have to use a little thinking, a little extra thinking in your brain to figure out, is this an insult? Why would someone say this in particular? Do you think that they're being rude on purpose? Are they under the wrong impression about something being true that's led them to say something? You got to actually read between the lines. There are certain actions in brackets, such as snapping his fingers. You'll see the brackets and that'll be obvious. So it just tells you to look closely for the directions, and it'll indicate which characters are present during a conversation, which is important for the plot. Now here on slide 18, they give you 3 different stage directions, just in case you don't know. An aside is when the character speaks to himself or their self, and sometimes the audience. So whenever you see something that says aside, the other characters on the stage can't hear what's said in the aside. Remember that. And then the last 2 are exunt and exit. So exunt means that more than one character is entering the stage. It's almost like a plural. And exit is when one character leaves the stage. So if someone says, I have to ride out for the morrow to reach Denmark, and then it says exit, that one character has exited. Everyone else is still there. He announced that he left, and then he left. If you see exunt, usually that means everyone that heard the announcement or heard whatever was going on in that scene of the play left. So they all came there just to hear what he was going to say. And he said he was going to leave. So afterwards, they all left. So exunt is multiple people and exit is for one character. Okay. Slide 19 gets into characterization and setting, and they give you information about the 2 different types of characterization. Now, this is covered in earlier English courses, but just in case you don't know um, where that information is, you can find it, just as a reminder, you can find it in the English resource course. Now, I just want to remind you that the English resource course is assigned to everyone that has an English class unless you are in Step Up. If you are not in Step Up, or I'm sorry, if you are in Step Up, then you probably weren't assigned to this class, but you can ask for the link to this. You can, in fact, actually ask your advocate to give you the link to the English concept summaries. There's a link here, it's shareable, and it has all of the summaries of concepts from English 9 all the way up to English 12. You can see this here. So if you need information about different types of characterization, you can go back to other school years and actually get into that information. Let's see if I can actually find it. Characterization. I know it's either in this one or 9B, I think. Okay, here we go. Dang, I missed it. It was so easy. So here, there's a link to a PowerPoint that explains characterization. Yep, so you get direct characterization. There are examples here, and then there's indirect characterization and the example of indirect characterization. And you can get access to those things if you need them. So just as a summary, direct characterization is when you describe a character's traits directly. So directly describing a character's traits. In a novel, you might read a sentence such as, the girl was mean, tall, and liked to scare children. They're telling you who this person is and things about her. She's tall. We know she's tall. She's mean. So that means that she's probably rude to most people, and she liked to scare children. So they're telling you that without showing you or describing an incident where she does that. In indirect characterization, you have to reveal characters through their words and actions. So for direct characterization, they tell you what this person is like. The girl was mean, tall, and liked to scare children. But if you wanted to make an indirect version of this, it would say a tall, frowning girl could enter the stage. This is like in a play, creep up to a child and make a scary sound. That would show you that she likes to scare children because you're actually watching her do it. And if she's doing it just casually, then it's probably something she enjoys to do. They might have her give a creepy smile afterwards to show she's enjoying it or something like that. Now they talk about setting. So setting basically is the when and where a scene actually happens. If you know what time period it's in or you know what the location is, that is what the setting is. It says when you read a play, the setting is often alluded to through narration, dialogue, or the playwright's stage directions. So the characters aren't going to tell you where they are, is what they're saying. Usually when you go to the store, you don't announce to people who aren't looking, I'm here at the store. So since a play is supposed to be replicating or simulating real life, the characters aren't going to tell you where they are. Usually you have to gather details from the text and sort of use your imaginations based on what people are saying. And that's what makes Shakespeare a little harder to read than most other things. Sometimes you'll get a playwright that gives you a description in the beginning of the play of where people are. They'll set the tone for you at the beginning, and then no one else has to mention it after that because you generally know where you are. But others, like Shakespeare, don't give you that description at all. They let the characters and what they're saying deal with it. So they give you an example of that. So they give you this little dialogue here. Bernardo says, "'Tis now struck 12, get thee to bed, Francisco." So Bernardo is telling Francisco to go to bed. So since he's telling him what time it is, back in Shakespeare's day, people would understand without having to think about it that if there's two men, one is taking over duties for the other, and it's 12, then they're on watch, probably at a castle or some other big building. Because that's basically what security used to be for famous kings and queens and people who own land. You would have people posted up, and they would work in like 4-hour shifts. So this person, Bernardo, shows up and he's like, "Yep, it's my shift. You can go to bed now." And Francisco says, "This relief, much thanks, 'tis bitter cold, and I am sick at heart." So when he says it's bitter cold, you can tell that he's outside. So these are not like guards that are posted inside next to somebody's room or something. These are the guys that are like on top of the ramparts, the top areas of people who are keeping watch in the distance for people who are approaching the castle. There's no footnote or anything. You know it's cold, so you can picture the icy breath in the air. If it's cold enough for him to complain about it, you can probably infer or understand that it's cold enough for him to see his breath while he's talking. So Bernardo comes to fill in and Francisco goes to bed. Now, the dialogue here doesn't actually say that they're at a castle or on ramparts or anything, but you have to use like a little common sense. If two people are on, or, if two people are together, one of them is complaining about how cold it is, and he's talking about relief, and the other person is talking about what time it is, it's time for you to go to bed. Back in that time, that's just what it meant. Now, you'd probably be thinking of maybe someone is like out camping or something like that. Someone's at watch, something in that context. But during this time, Hamlet is specifically about nobles who are in a castle and what they're doing. So in the play, it makes more sense to assume that these are guards for the castle or the manor that these people stay in. A lot of questions. Okay. Now, moving into the focus on language portions, they're basically telling you about Shakespeare making up a lot of the words that we use today. So they tell you about how he writes. He writes his plays mostly in blank verse. And if you don't remember from any of the lessons we've gone over blank verse in before, just as a refresher, blank verse is unrhymed iambic pentameter. So to brush over it, I've gone over this in a few videos at this point. So I don't want to spend every video going over what an iamb is and what meter is. So just as a quick overview, iambs are when you have the sound pattern of an unstressed syllable, that's a short sound, followed by a stressed syllable, that's a long sound. As a short example, the word table has 2 syllables. Te stretches out. You can literally see it when you say it, te. That is a stressed syllable. Bull sounds like it's cut off at the end when you say it, table. It doesn't last very long. So that's an unstressed syllable. Iambs is a pattern of unstressed and then stressed syllables. An iambic pentameter means that that pattern repeats in the line 5 times. Penta means 5. Meter is the pattern of the line. So iambic is unstressed and then stressed. Pentameter is times 5. It repeats 5 times. So since you have this 2-syllable pattern repeating 5 times, that means that your lines are going to have 10 syllables because 2 times 5 is 10. So he wrote most of his plays in that pattern. No matter what, that was the pattern. Occasionally, when he wanted to emphasize something, he would stick a rhyme in. So most of his poetry didn't rhyme at all. But then when he wanted you to pay attention, he might add a rhyme in there. He also made up a lot of his own words. And then they give you this list here at the bottom. He would often combine words to make a compound word. He also used suffixes to turn nouns into verbs or create new adverbs from adjectives. So this is a list of all the words that he helped create. It's only a sample of the words that he helped create, as you'll see on the next slide. Now they tell you here on this slide 27, that he has more than 33,000 references in the Oxford Dictionary. And these are just examples of the use of the words that he helped make popular. Even though he made up a lot of the words that we use today, it's still a little difficult reading his plays for the first time because some of the spellings of those words have changed. Some of those words have different meanings now than they did when he wrote them. And sometimes the sentences are arranged in a different order. So you're going to want to take your time while you're going through that. Okay, so now we're talking about internal conflict and motivation. And the reason why we're talking about this is because it shows up in his plays all the time. It shows up in stories all the time, really. So internal conflict, just as a reminder, these are concepts from earlier English courses. You can always go to the English concepts sheet to get that information. But just as a reminder, conflict is a type of obstacle or a problem. It's a problem that a character has to face in a story. There are two types of these, just like there are two types of characterization. You have internal conflict, which is a problem or obstacle that happens on the inside. So when you're trying to make a difficult choice, if you're trying to take care of yourself or choose to put someone else ahead of you so that they can do well, even if it'll mean bad things for you, that's an internal conflict. External conflict is a problem between a character and something on the outside. So external means outside, internal means inside. So something on the outside could be a war. There's a war brewing, and maybe your character is in danger of being enlisted, and he doesn't believe in the reason why the war is happening. So he has to deal with figuring out if he's going to run away to not be forced to fight, or if he's going to cope and go anyway. That's an example of external conflicts. He can't control what's happening. And they basically talk about in the second paragraph how there's different types of degrees of internal conflict. Internal conflict can be as easy as trying to decide what you want for dinner. Oh no, I've got a taste for 5, 6, 7 million different things. How am I going to decide, right? Or it could be as serious as figuring out whether or not you should betray a friend. Your best friend's done something terrible. Maybe somebody got hurt, and you have to decide whether or not you're going to tell on them for the benefit of doing the right thing. That could be like a more complicated internal conflict. Usually, there's both types of problems in a story. It's very rare that you only get a story with one type of conflict in it. Now we get into how this applies to the play. So I don't do excerpts. I do not review the excerpts because you guys have to read that stuff on your own. But I will go over some of the information that gives you a summary of what happens in the excerpt so that you can go back and have a better reference to what's going on while you're following along, because I think that helps. So this slide tells you about Hamlet's internal conflict. Basically, his father dies and his mother quickly marries his uncle. And this is an issue for lots of reasons. Not only does it seem, like bad just from him being, in the position of being his uncle's nephew, but also if you were to marry your husband or wife's sibling at the time, that was considered incest, even when the spouse had died. So Hamlet is like grossed out. He's creeped out. This doesn't make sense. It seems like something that his mom wouldn't do. He doesn't understand. And he's still grieving over the loss of his dad. So he has to make decisions about how he's going to deal with this, because he's both angry at his mom for moving on so quick and for doing it in a disgusting way. And he's just sad in general that his dad is dead. His dad is gone. So they give you an example of lines here that show you how disgusted he feels about the whole situation. And then later on, he encounters the ghost of his dad and things get worse. So he's pretty much told by his dad's ghost, yo, my brother totally killed me. So you got to avenge me. You have to take revenge on your uncle because you're my son and like that's your job as my son. So he's dealing with a lot after that encounter. Not only is he dealing with just his general feelings about his mom and uncle and his dad dying, but he's seen a ghost at this point, so that's traumatic. And the ghost is asking him to commit murder, which is also traumatic. He's not sure if he's the sort of person who can boss up and actually, murder his uncle. So he has to decide whether or not he's going to do honor to his father's ghost that's haunting him. And he's also trying to keep all these things secret at the same time, because you can't just go around telling people, oh, I saw a ghost and you told me to kill someone. That's nuts. You can't do that. So he's trying to balance all of these things at the same time. Let's see. Okay, so now we get into motivation. The first paragraph pretty much gives you all the explanation you need. Why do we do the things we do? Why do you think that Hamlet's uncle killed his brother? Why would the queen marry her husband's brother? Motivation is the reason, justification, and explanation of a character's action. So that's the definition of motivation right there. Most of the characters in a play or in a story at all have their own motives. I'm sure that lots of you have seen TV shows or movies where people show up and you don't know why they're there, but you can tell that they have a reason. Usually you find out there's like a revenge plot, or I want to join up with the main character because this person also hurt me, and or hurt the village or my loved ones or my family, something like that. Some people just have their own reasons for doing things, and motivation is usually a combination of the character's personality and the circumstances that surround the character. So not everybody's motivation for things is the same. If you are a quieter, meeker person, if someone does something wrong to you, maybe you wouldn't confront them directly. Maybe what you would do is try to set up an elaborate plan to make them look bad without having to fight them directly. But let's say maybe you happen to be the sort of person who trains all the time or knows how to do a martial art, or who has been bullied before. So you just don't have any patience left to talk it out or to ignore things. So you want to go in and bat. Everyone chooses their own reasons to do things. And their personality is a part of that. So you have to think about what the personality of the person is like when you consider why they are doing something. So while you're reading Hamlet, take a look at the things that people are saying and the types of ideas they're pushing forward, and try to figure out what the reason is, or how that could contribute towards like their motivation to do or say what they've said. Now, the last slide just gives you information about how motivation ties into the story. A lot of the characters don't know about Hamlet's father's ghost visiting him. And so they don't really know why Hamlet is being weird, other than, like his mom being sinful by marrying his uncle. Hamlet seems to be even weirder than someone who's affected by that situation, his father dying. So people don't really know what's going on. The king and queen suspect that he's just bitter about his father's death and the marriage. And there are other characters that think that there's reasons behind it. They all make their own guess. And it's just like with normal people. Whenever someone does something, you're like, why did they do that? A lot of the characters in Hamlet spend time trying to figure out what's motivating Hamlet to do the things that he does in this play. Slide 37 basically just says, Hamlet's motivations are not the only disputed motivations in the play. So there are other characters that end up laying eyes on King Hamlet's ghost, and they start making moves based on what they've seen too. And that comes up in the play in another way. There are issues with what's going on during the time period of the play. The Danes, which is a group of people, and we mentioned this earlier in the course, the Danes were one of the groups that were taking over England from the north. Now, the Danes were preparing for war against the Norwegians. So they're on a time crunch trying to figure out how to solve this problem while everything else is going on. And it says, however, we soon find out that the king's ghost has other motivations. So everyone has motivations here. They're all trying to encourage each other to do things for different reasons. And part of the entertainment of the play is guessing and figuring out why people are doing certain things as part of the audience. So they just want you to keep that in mind while you're reading. The actual motivations of the characters are super important. So don't sleep on that. Take your time, try to figure out what kind of person these characters are, so that you can understand at least a little bit what everyone's going through while you're reading the lines. And I think that's about it. Yep, that's about it for this lesson. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, as per usual, if you are having issues with understanding this reading selection, or understanding any of the excerpts and the lines and how they connect to things that we talked about, please schedule tutoring with a tutor. You can contact me or Kathy Vahovic. If you have a quick question that we can bang out, just, like in one email back and forth, feel free to email the English department at english@atsedu.net. But otherwise, just book a tutoring session. Okay, but that's it for me. This is Ms. Amber signing off, and good luck with the rest of your English class.